Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Standards Panel on the 28th of June. Can I ask for nominations for chairman of this panel? Pop your microphone on.
Let's nominate Councillor Goodrich.
Can I second that nomination?
Thank you, members. Councillor Goodrich, would you like to take over?
Thank you very much indeed. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations to declare? There are none. Next item is item 3, and one normally deals with these things in non-exempt. We have a recommendation before us. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Right. Item 4. We have the papers in front of us to deal with a complaint brought by Councillor Rubini regarding Councillor Hyman, and we got all the papers, and Councillor Hyman, you've presumably got all the papers as well. We haven't got a, I think before I go any further, I'd like to introduce people. I think that would be a politic thing to do. I'm Councillor Michael Goodrich. I'm councillor for Wannosh and Blackheath. And on my left,
I'm Councillor Gale. I'm the ward councillor for Milford.
I'm Peter Marriott, Councillor Peter Marriott. I'm the ward member for Upper Hale and Farnham.
and then on my extreme right, we have
Louise Fleming, Democratic Services and Business Support Team Manager.
and then
Robin Taylor, Head of Policy and Governance and Monitoring Officer for Waverley Borough Council.
I'm Claire Beasley, Senior Legal Officer from Guildford Borough Council, providing legal support today.
I'm William Donnelly. I'm the independent person that's been nominated by Robin to deal with this matter.
Richard Lingard, independent investigator.
thank you, and Councillor Hyman.
Councillor Jerry Hyman, ward member for Farnham Firgrove.
Thank you very much. Now, looking at the papers, we haven't got a statement or any information from Councillor Hyman, so I would just like to clarify before we proceed exactly what issues we have to deal with. And therefore, sort of, this is not evidence time, Councillor Hyman, but just to answer simple questions, what, yes or no. I mean, do you accept that on the 18th of August 2021, you attended an informal briefing meeting on Zoom when the Chief Executive spoke, and you interrupted him with words that are the effect, "Don't bullshit me"? Do you accept those words were said?
Yes, it was unintentional interruption.
Yeah. Yes.
I absolutely accept that,
Fine.
that those were the exact words.
Thank you. And I think it's agreed that you apologise for not realising that your microphone was switched on. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes, immediately.
Thank you.
Well, immediately it went absolutely silent in the
Yep.
on the webcast.
And thirdly, do you accept or not that using the word bullshit, bullshitting was not appropriate, and that you failed to treat the Chief Executive with respect? Yes or no?
Absolutely, that that I should not have used the word, and I apologised at the time, and that is a matter of it is a matter of record. It's not a matter of public record. So I did apologise, and that's the issue here. That I have told everybody all along that I did apologise at the time, and I've asked, what more do you want?
Well, I think the evidence that we have, which is being presented to us, is that you apologise for your microphone being left on, but you did not apologise for using the words that you used, and you've been invited to do so on many occasions since and have not done so.
That's false.
Okay, well,
I did
okay.
absolutely 100%, and I built Farnham Residence on the on integrity, and
Right, all right.
and I really do object to some of the words that have been put into these documentations, but we can cover that when it's.
Okay.
But I do absolutely, and I do have. There is a recording of the meeting, and it shows that I'm telling the truth. So that's why, you know, why I would engage I would engage with the process if it wasn't for the fact that that the basis of this is untrue. Thank you.
Okay, well, I wanted to be absolutely clear what the issues were that this panel has to determine.
Can we make sure that we are aware of what the issues are then, in that case? Because I understand that that there is absolutely no issue. No one is taking issue with what I was effectively saying at the time, that the chief executive was misleading members in the briefing and therefore was not complying with the Nolan principles.
We're not here.
No one is making any complaints.
We are not going to be here to determine what the chief executive said at the briefing, whether it be 100% true or not 100% true.
Well, I'm sorry, but
that is not
objectivity
an issue.
at number
that
3.
That is not an issue that
right.
we are
Chairman, may I ask you? I have to object here then, if that's going the way that this is going to be run, because that's not in that really isn't in the spirit of the Nolan principles, which say that holders of public office must act and take decisions impartially, fairly, and on merit, using the best evidence and without discrimination or bias. And if we're not allowed to look at the context, which I was absolutely certain was something which you would have to look at in such an investigation. I understand it wasn't part of the remit of the independent person, which you know, makes things very difficult as well. It never is. As you took the same approach back in 2019 when you chaired the previous standards panel meeting against us, would you mind giving up the chair to someone else, someone independent? Because I don't think it's appropriate for the Tory party whip to be seen to be taking the chair in every action, because there have been plenty against me, as you know.
Not a political issue at all. You are going to, the hearing will be before the tribunal that is constituted, in which the tribunal has decided who should be the chairman, and I am the chairman.
Right, might as well go home now then, I think.
We will now deal with the hearing. Now, the conduct of the hearing and the format is set out on page 12 of the papers, which sets out the procedure that we will be following. And the first item, therefore, is the statement of the investigating officer. And I'm going to ask him to present his report. The report has obviously been read by us, so it's just a question of whether you wish to highlight anything, Mr. Lingard, or add anything to it since you wrote it. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. You've already referred to the very comprehensive agenda and the explanatory notes about the procedure, and I don't propose to detain you very long in the introduction. You may have noted in the brief CV at the front of my report that I've now conducted over 50 investigations into alleged breaches of codes of conduct of various authorities. And I have to say that the brevity of my report, which constitutes about 10% of the agenda papers before you, is a reflection of the fact that this is, without doubt, the most straightforward case I've ever dealt with in the last 11 years. The facts are not, subject to what Councillor Hyman has just said, in dispute, as far as I can see. That I was presented with nothing from Councillor Hyman which dissuaded me that the facts as set out by Councillor Rubini in his complaint were inaccurate. My clear understanding was that he had indeed apologised for the fact that he left his microphone on. He did not apologise for the use of the words to which you have referred. And this case also stands out as the only one in which I've dealt in which the subject member has a very brief and unsatisfactory telephone conversation aside, declined to engage despite numerous invitations to do so. Now, as I say at paragraph 5.3 of my report, although in the general scheme of things, the word bullshitting may not nowadays be regarded as particularly offensive when compared with other expressions, in using the language that he did, clearly directed towards the Chief Executive, in my view, Councillor Hyman was in breach of paragraphs 1.1 and 1.2 of the Waverley Code. Now, I trust it's clear why I consider there to have been a breach of paragraph 1.2, which refers specifically to employees of the council, i.e. the Chief Executive. But you may just wonder why I consider that he also breached paragraph 1.1, which refers to other councillors and members of the public rather than officers. My view is that this sort of language is totally inappropriate in the type of setting in which the briefing was held. And although the words may have been directed primarily at the Chief Executive, its use clearly demonstrates a lack of respect for everybody else in the room or the virtual room. And that is reflected in the fact that Councillor Robini lodged his complaint. And that's what brought us here today. I know that your procedure, Chairman, provides for me to call witnesses. I very seldom do that because, and particularly in this case, as I say, the facts speak for themselves. And we are looking at facts which have led me to form my opinion. And my opinion is clear that the facts point to a breach of 2 paragraphs of your code of conduct on the part of Councillor Hyman. Chairman, unless there's anything else I can assist you with, I don't propose to say anything further.
Right. Yeah, Councillor Marriott.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Lingard, did you manage to look at the recording of the meeting that Councillor Hyman referred to establish the exact words that were used?
No, I didn't. No.
Perhaps I could ask, what do you think a layman would consider the words bullshitting to mean?
Well, talking in a manner which was intended to befuddle or dissemble or cloak, as they say in the COB, that sort of thing. To coming up with something which is intended to convey a particular impression, which is not true.
Do you think it would include being dishonest?
It could do. It'd rather depend on the context.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I say, to be honest, I wasn't aware that there was a recording of the meeting, and my attention hadn't been drawn to it. Certainly, had I known about it, I would have. Excuse me, I would have watched it. Bullshit means something that is not substantially true. It could include dishonesty. I say it would depend on the context. It's just not a very pleasant way to convey one's feeling in a what is it? Not exactly a public debate, but it's a debate amongst civilized people.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Taylor, you want to comment?
Chairman, just as a point of information, there is no recording of the meeting. Some meetings and briefings are recorded and others aren't, and this one wasn't recorded.
Thank you. Which is why you didn't listen to it.
Indeed.
Okay. Any more questions here?
Yeah.
Councillor Gale.
Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say it's an inappropriate term to use in any setting, especially in a setting of council. Is that what you're actually saying?
Yes, it's sort of pub language, isn't it? Or if you're in private with somebody. Let's say it's compared with a lot of language which you hear and see on the television. It's not desperately offensive, but it's inappropriate and it's disrespectful.
Councillor Hyman, do you want to ask Mr. Lingard any questions?
If I may, Chairman, thank you. Yes, Mr. Lingard, I did give you a call and you were driving at the time. Am I correct?
I was driving, but I stopped when you rang.
Right, but the phone call was lost. I did tell you in that call that I had made, but because one of the issues here is that we're being told that I didn't make an apology for the language when I did, and that's been all along why I haven't bothered to engage with this, because I knew that it was a false premise, that I'd already apologised. I spoke to the monitoring officer in November and told him that I had apologised for both, but he wouldn't listen. I spoke to you on the phone in March after, about 6 weeks after I had spoken to Mr. Rabini, the complainant. Mr. Rabini phoned me and said, "This is a terrible waste of public funds. Can we just stop this, please? Will you make an apology for your language?" And I said to him, "I did." He said, "Oh, well, I didn't hear it. I know he has problems with his internet connection, whatever, but I know full well that I did make that
Can you
apology."
just ask a question on the statement?
Yes, okay. What language would be appropriate in the circumstances where the chief executive is dissembling the words that you use? What language would be appropriate then? Because we're talking about the use of BS, which obviously this was something where I don't know about you. I've sat at home for 20 years virtually watching webcasts of meetings. I've only been a councillor for 6 years, but 20 years watching webcasts, and obviously it's rather like watching television.
Simple
if people say
question,
things,
please, not a statement.
it's being made out that this is not a term that you would use. Well, we're sat at home in our living rooms, and the chief executive had repeatedly made this statement, which I knew to be untrue, and I've got just a transcript and a sheet with me, which is what the chief executive was referring to, a meeting where the matter had been discussed. I was saying it hadn't been discussed. He was saying it was. This went on for a while, and when it was repeated, misleading the residents, the councillors, I thought was completely wrong to do. It is contrary to the
Can we have a
principles.
question, Mr. Hyman?
Do you accept
not
for a start that
diatribe?
honesty comes above this process of politeness? That the Nolan principles are the basis of the of any standard system, and if you're not complying with honesty, then that's the person who is in the wrong, not the person who's complaining about it.
If I can isolate a question from that, my response is we are not looking today, and I was not looking during the course of my investigation at the alleged conduct of the chief executive. I was investigating a complaint by Councillor Robini about your use of language, and that is what I focused on. Going back to the question which you asked at the beginning of your address, when you telephoned me, I was just leaving the house, and when you phoned, I stopped the car, and what you said to me was that you understood that Councillor Robini was now thinking of withdrawing his complaint because you had actually apologised. And I said to him, I said to you rather, that my understanding was that the apology you'd offered, which was for the fact that you'd left your microphone switched on rather than for the word used, that Councillor Robini didn't think that that response was adequate, that his complaint was still live, and that I would accordingly continue with my investigation. And it's at that point we were cut off for reasons I don't know. It could have been loss of signal, it could have been your end, could have been mine, I don't know. I tried to return your call, but to no avail. And I have to say it was with some surprise that I noticed that you didn't engage with the process, even if it was only to explain in an email or a letter or whatever, what you wanted to say in your defence.
If we cover the issues that were there, I understand now that that conversation must have been cut off before we were, I was on a landline at home. It wasn't my phone that was the issue, I'm quite sure of that. But it's what happens. That's not something to discuss here. But I did tell you in that phone call, and I assumed that you had heard. I didn't know it at which point, obviously you don't know until afterwards when somebody hasn't responded to you, that the phone call's no longer going. I did tell you that it was both, that I'd responded to both. I'm sorry if you didn't hear that. That's what it is. I did try to phone you immediately. I couldn't get through to you. I think you've said that you didn't try to get back to me.
That wouldn't have prevented you contacting me by email or letter, as I was forced to contact you in the lack of any response.
You're quite right, and I have throughout this process decided. I think most of the members here know what the background of this is. This is all about. Since the chief executive, and I think we're talking about 2017, after I was elected as a councillor, we had a number of issues where I could not get honest responses out of our officers and the senior management team, specifically in relation to habitats and air quality, the big issues for Farnham.
Let's not go into that.
No, we're not allowed to go into the
Make
truth.
matters worse by making allegations now that you may find can't be proved.
Not at all. I mean, this is very, very simple. Extremely simple. People like to avoid it, but the fact is, and I think Mr. Lingard, because he was the.
Right. Have you any other questions of Mr. Lingard?
Okay. Yes. Is it? Do you think it's appropriate to hold an investigation into a matter where someone has said or implied that someone else isn't telling the truth? Do you think it's appropriate to have an investigation that doesn't
Chairman,
look at whether the truth, who was telling the truth? I mean, does the truth not make any difference when actually honesty is one of our core principles? Surely the matter here is
you are making an allegation this morning that the chief executive has been speaking untruths. That's a serious allegation to be making.
I made the allegation at the time, months ago.
So
many times.
Your case
it's a matter of record.
Is that yes, I called him a liar because he is a liar. And he
was misleading members, yes.
I see.
And he isn't arguing with that. He hasn't put in a complaint. Nobody has. And if you look at the minutes of the meeting you referred to, supposedly we debated it. I was a member of that meeting.
You're on very dangerous territory, Councillor.
Well, I'm having to defend claims that I'm.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman.
Would you please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on the question from Councillor Hyman, and all the questions need to go through the chair, it's just as one point of protocol. There was a question there as to whether or not it was appropriate for Mr. Lingard to investigate this matter. Just to be clear, that wasn't Mr. Lingard's decision, that was my decision. I commissioned Mr. Lingard to investigate this matter because I was satisfied that there may have been a breach of the code here and it had not been possible to deal with it on an informal basis. And therefore, after consulting with the independent person, I asked Mr. Lingard to investigate the matter and to bring his findings back to me, which is what he did.
Thank you. Have you any other questions you wish to ask through me?
In terms of what the monitoring officers just said, that's
no, I
not
just
the point.
want any further questions of Mr. Lingard. He's answered the question that he never heard you say you'd apologized for the words used. Is there anything else you want to ask?
Well, yes, there is, because the whole basis of this matter here is that I've been unable to engage with the chief executive and the monitoring officer ever since the 2018 People Over Wind judgment, because the council's incapable of telling the truth.
We're dealing with
and I'm not going to be allowed to defend myself, Mr. Chairman, am I? And that's why I have concerns with this, with the way that this process operates. If an investigation doesn't include an investigation into the main point, which was an allegation I made at the time that the chief executive was not telling the truth.
You have misunderstood, Mr. Hyman, why we're here.
Not to find out the truth.
Listen, we are here to decide whether the words you used on the 18th of August 2021 was an appropriate way of addressing an officer of this council. And
absolutely, and I apologised at the
issue.
time for that. And this entire matter has been a complete waste of time, and it's been political. But it's a vexatious complaint, and this panel does have the option of determining that this is a vexatious complaint and seeking an apology to me from the person making this complaint, Yeah, and to me, that would be correct in the circumstances, because I was the only person in that meeting who was actually abiding by our duty under the Nolan principles of challenging poor behaviour.
You'll have your opportunity of speaking in a moment. Let it be said that the investigating officer does not think this is vexatious or has come up with a very clear conclusion in his report.
I understand that, but he's working on very limited. He's admitted, and you've told us, and you're telling the public, the residents, and this is about public perception, that this is an investigation into me making an allegation of against the chief executive at the time, as it was my duty to do in accordance with the Nolan principles. That's what we're here for. Holders of public office should exhibit these principles in their own behaviour. They should actively promote and robustly support the principles.
Yes, we know.
And so, sorry, please, if you wouldn't interrupt, because this is the point, Mr. Chairman, be willing to challenge poor behaviour wherever it occurs. And Waverley has a long history of not being able to respond candidly to a lot of questions.
That is your opinion.
And holders of public offices, it's a matter of public record, holders of public office should be truthful. It's the reason why the administration changed, and I'm here because I orchestrated that.
Right.
And they're trying to change the council and trying to clean up the council. And that's
I
why
assume
we're here.
you have no further questions of Mr. Lingard.
No, I'd like an answer to my question in respect of the priorities, our priorities and your priorities here, because it's most important.
Mr. Lingard is here to investigate and provide his findings. And he's been instructed by Mr. Taylor as our monitoring officer, having checked through the independent person. The procedure has been followed. The report has been received. You have got a copy of that report. And the issues that are have been investigated by Mr. Lingard are the matters that we are dealing with here today only.
So the matter of who's telling the truth
is not something this
absolutely
hearing
irrelevant.
Is going to go into at all.
Just as long as the public understand that this isn't about truthfulness and honesty. It isn't about honesty and truthfulness, which is the Nolan principles. It's about whether people are allowed to tell untruths without any sort of recourse. And if someone is wound up enough to be rude about it, or accidentally leaves their Zoom mic on, which we've all done at some point, then you're allowed to get away with the untruths, and the person gets dragged through a system for many, many months at great expense to them because they have to give up work.
Yeah, okay, you have your opportunity to speak in a moment.
But I have got one other question then for Mr. Lingard, if I may.
One brief, succinct question.
Mr. Lingard was the monitoring officer at Guildford Borough Council in the period to 2010, 2011, I understand. And Mr. Ling, right. and that is part of the period in which the People over Wind and Sweetman ruling has effectively said that all the decisions taken by the local authorities, which include Guildford and Waverley Borough Council, were unlawful because they were based on the Hart ruling. And so Mr. Lingard would have been the monitoring officer responsible for the Guildford Borough Council's compliance with the law.
Chair.
Yeah.
At the time.
Can we?
And I just wondered whether that should be.
I don't think this is a relevant question at all.
I just wondered whether it should be an interest.
I'm going to rule that question out of order.
Through you, yes. Chairman, if I may just respond to a point which Councillor Hyman didn't quite phrase it as a question, or more or less, but I will treat it as such. And he talked about the Nolan principles. Could I just refer him and you to page 20 of your agenda papers, and that includes an extract from the Code of Conduct, and it's paragraph 1.1, 1.2, which I've already quoted in the report. And if you look at the last paragraph there, respect means politeness and courtesy in behaviour, speech, and in the written word. You should not, last sentence, you should not, however, subject individuals, groups of people, or organisations to personal attack. And in my view, that's exactly what this was.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chairman. And the point here, of course, is that for the
Thank-
past 20 years, I have been subject to attacks by this council for being the whistleblower, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on a handful of points, because some of those questions there that were directed towards Mr. Lingard really ought to be for me to answer, so with your indulgence. There was a question raised as to whether or not this complaint was vexatious. And it is part of our process for dealing with allegations of misconduct that I consider at an early stage whether or not a complaint is vexatious. Just to be clear, I did not think at the time that the complaint was received that it was a vexatious complaint, and I still don't take the opinion. It's still my view that this is not a vexatious complaint. It was a legitimate complaint that needed to be considered, and for the reasons that I've already set out in the report, it eventually had to be considered by an external investigator. So that's point one. Point two, which has already been referenced there by Mr. Lingard, is that the purpose of the hearing today is to discuss, just to be absolutely clear, is to discuss Councillor Hyman's conduct, not the concerns he may have had, because I've been very clear as the council's monitoring officer with Councillor Hyman that he's entitled to have concerns, he is entitled to challenge, he is entitled to constructively criticise. What he's not entitled to do is to have poor conduct when he's doing so. Two other points, because I was one of the people who did attend the briefing in question, and I feel that it does need to be corrected to have my view in that. I was at that meeting. It was not the case that the chief executive was telling untruths, and I want to put it on record that the chief executive dealt fairly, calmly and professionally with the interruption from Councillor Hyman when it happened. And the final thing I'd like to say is that I was at that meeting and there was no apology given by Councillor Hyman for the words that we used. The apology was restricted to the fact that your microphone was left unmuted, Councillor Hyman, and that is the reason, unfortunately, that we're here today.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Lingard? Very briefly. No. Fine. Well, thank you, Mr. Lingard. That's your evidence. So we now pass on to Roman little 3 of a statement by Councillor Hyman. Now, you've not made a statement and you know the issues that we're dealing with, and I will, I'm afraid, interrupt you every time you stray from the issues that this panel have to determine. So if you wish to make a brief statement, Councillor Hyman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's, I think, quite obvious, or would be if anyone's watching, if members of the public are watching, that the process that we have here does not address the truth. It's simply here to make a decision upon whether somebody, in isolation, what they did was naughty. And I absolutely put my hands up. I mean, I'd been speaking on the occasion in a meeting which was convened 18th of August last summer. And I think that to most people means that half the people were away, half the people, less than half of Waverley members turned up for this all-member briefing on an important matter which had not been before us at all. It was called Where Work Happens, which was just a nice and less inflammatory way of saying working from home. And this was something which had not been discussed at all. At that meeting, contrary to what it's in the papers before us, the implications in the papers before us, in that meeting, we were provided with a fait accompli. We were told that by our staff, we are working from home and that's it. Not our decision. And if someone wants to listen to our recording, I have a recording of that meeting. So if someone wants to keep saying that there isn't a recording of that meeting, there is, I have a recording of that meeting. If you want to keep saying that I am dishonest and that I can't be believed, well, you're welcome to keep saying that. But nevertheless, I'm telling you that at that meeting, approximately 2 minutes after making the apology, accidentally leaving my microphone on after speaking, I'd asked, I think it was the third or fourth time, for a response to my question in respect of due process. And I was asking repeatedly of the senior management team what when members had been consulted on this, engaged on this, when members had made any sort of decision on this. And we were told, firstly, that it wasn't an issue for members, and secondly, that we had debated it, and the chief executive specifically a number of times responded by backing up other members of the senior management team, responded to my question with a claim that we had debated it at a meeting which I think you were present at on the 8th of March 2021 of the Value for Money Overview and Scrutiny Committee, of which I was a member. Now, during that meeting, I was absolutely sure that we hadn't debated it and that the chief executive was wrong, was mistaken. I know he's a busy man. We can all make mistakes. It's not a problem. But you know, when you have implied that that is not correct and you'd like to be told the truth, when the person keeps on telling you something which you know isn't true, well, I checked it on my computer. I was at home, obviously, in the Zoom meeting. I put it on my computer from that meeting, the minutes, and I saw the item he'd referred to where he told us that the issue of working from home had been debated. And the minutes confirm 100% that it hadn't been debated. I can quote from those minutes. I just printed one page, which is the business transformation project agenda item 8, which is what was referred to repeatedly by the chief executive. And the minutes say the portfolio holder for business transformation and IT expressed the wish that people could get back to working in person. He thanked staff for keeping progress on track. The business transformation project had already made a third of the savings plan. The head of business transformation.
Councillor Hyman, we are not here to decide whether the chief executive, what he said. It's the words you used in response.
Thank you.
Even if an officer says things that you don't think are true, there are ways of saying it, and bullshitting is not the right word to say it.
It's been absolutely clear. I think it's clear to everybody. I had absolutely no intention whatsoever of saying that, and I wouldn't say that in a meeting. We have members in planning meetings using words CRAP and other words which are the same sort of semi-offensive words, and words that we wouldn't really want to use. I didn't use those words in public meeting. Nobody else gets dragged through this sort of system.
You did, because it was 30 people present when you said it, and you've admitted that at the beginning that you said it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. My whole point here is I was the only person who was in that meeting who was actually abiding by the Nolan principles and our duties of holding people to account. I'm the whistleblower who gets picked on. And obviously I understand the politics of it as well. We're not allowed to talk about that here. But you know, I have a very long history of fighting for candour. I mean, throughout the standards system, and you've been there. I have been asking for the duty of candour to be put in place so that we can get a straight answer to a question. We can't get a straight answer to a question in this council, and everybody is refusing to allow us to have anything including the complainant here who blocked it and stopped me making a motion on the matter in the standards meeting. I think that was March 2020. 2021.
So are you saying that to use the words that we've mentioned is inappropriate in a public meeting?
It wasn't a public meeting. Yes, it would be inappropriate, absolutely, but it was an accident in an informal meeting. In fact, I think. So
you are saying because it was an informal.
Complainant himself, Mr. Chairman, has said that this is What's the word that he used for it? It was trivial.
Who?
The complainant himself said, I know it's trivial. I mean, he himself said it was trivial. He phoned me up and told me that he
Okay,
was
well,
going to phone the monitoring officer the next day and withdraw the complaint. That was on or around February the 1st. I didn't know the date.
If you had apologised.
No, I told him that I had apologised at the time.
Okay.
It was true,
Okay,
and he
well,
trusted me. And he told me 100%. Now, I saw him at the church after the civic service, asked him whether he was going to be coming along here today. He said no. I was surprised. I said, you know, you could have stopped this. You told me that you were going to phone the monitoring officer and ask him to withdraw it after he'd phoned me up. And he told me that he didn't say that. Now, I know full well he did. So, you know, I have a great deal of difficulty with this situation when it appears that no one's actually going to be candid. This is extremely disappointing. I have a recording. I mean, obviously, this is going to go to appeal, and I'm going to stick. How much time do we have to waste on this?
You don't have a right of appeal if you read the papers.
Could someone clarify that, please?
Yeah,
Are you
I'll
saying the
ask the
truth?
monitoring officer. It's in the papers if you read it.
I think it says that the complainant doesn't have a right of appeal.
Councillor Hyman, paragraph 11.3, well, to everybody, what it says in the report is, as per paragraph 13 of the arrangement, if Councillor Hyman wishes to appeal against the decision of the hearings panel, he will have a right to have the decision reviewed by another 3 members of the Standards and General Purposes Committee panel who have not been involved. This will either involve a full rehearing of the case or be dealt with by way of written representation from the member. And that's my choice as to how that's my judgment as to how that will be dealt with. It's the complainant who doesn't have the right of appeal, but does have the right to complain to the local government ombudsman, just to be clear for everybody.
So it's a rehearing, not an appeal. But you have, just getting your position clear, you admit the words were inappropriate and shouldn't have been said in public.
They weren't said in public.
Let me finish. But you are saying that because this was an informal meeting, this wasn't a public meeting and therefore it didn't matter. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that you need to get this in context. It's not a public meeting. We do not spend the amount of money, actually.
But Mr. Lingard,
let's find out how much it is, because it's not in the papers. There are 2 issues in the papers. I think we ought to sort this out. One of them, I think, was page 76 of the papers I mounted. Would you mind turning to page 76? And you look down 76 and it says 2/3, 3/4 of the way down in my document in square parentheses, sensitive personal information redacted. Can I have an unredacted copy of this or?
Yeah, as I understand it, because I asked myself what that was, and I was told it had reference to your health. And therefore, with respect to you, that was left out. So the public would not have reference to your health.
I'm very surprised at that. I appreciate the thought, but certainly would have no problem with people knowing what happened at the time. The monitoring officer knows perfectly well, as I have no problem with people knowing that.
Well, as a matter of courtesy to you, he left it out.
Well, that's very kind.
Mr. Taylor.
So I have copies of the full email without that section redacted. My suggestion, Councillor Hyman, is that in fairness to you, I give you a copy of that first, and you be given the opportunity to decide whether or not that unredacted version is shared with everybody else here. You do not have to do that, and I want that to be your choice. So
I'd like to see a copy of this, if I may. Thank you.
If you're happy, Chairman, I'll share a copy initially with Councillor Hyman.
Yes,
give him a
please.
moment to make that decision.
Yes, please.
Okay. There's another issue in here that this document refers to complainants. It says, try and work out what page it was, because I appreciate I've been very busy and I'd haven't had a lot of time to spend on this. As I say, I apologise at the time. I consider this to be a complete waste of public funds. In these papers somewhere, it says it's going to tell us the amount of money that's been spent or wasted on this, but it doesn't tell us it. It's in there somewhere. Can you tell us how much this has cost? It should be in these documents. Have we told the public that these documents are now available online? They appeared at 10 o'clock this morning when we started. So the public can now read this document, which was withheld till
Yes,
10 o'clock.
since we dealt with item 3 on the agenda, the items are available to the public. They were not beforehand.
Right. Yes, do we know how much money has been
I
spent?
don't think that's irrelevant, and I don't have a clue on how much it cost. Justice has got to be done and seen to be done, and regardless of cost.
Absolutely, and justice is a matter of who's telling the truth, of course, and that's not within the
Exactly.
remit, is it? So,
Anything
so
else
people
you
work
want
that one
to-
out for themselves.
Anything you want to add, Mr. Hyman?
Yes, I mean, I find this absolutely, there's a quote in Mr. Donnelly's,
Yeah, he will be giving his evidence after you, so we can deal with him.
do I have another opportunity after that or not?
You can sum up
Right.
under item 7.
Okay. In that case, Mr. Chairman, yes, if I'm not going to have an opportunity to cover things properly after Mr. Donnelly has spoken, I want to go to his
Chairman, can I
evidence
just-
in here. I'd like you to
Can I
help me with
check?
the page.
Can I
Yeah.
please- So, apologies, Councillor Hyman, but just to check, so you were talking previously about the redacted information. Now, if you want to reflect on that during the course of the meeting, that's fine. But just to be clear, I haven't shared that information as yet with everybody else here, and I'm leaving that for you to give your consent for me to do so before I do that. And that is up to you. I don't think that information is needed to be seen by everybody else here for today's proceedings, but it was your request that that be shared with everybody else. So that is back to you to decide either now or later in the hearing whether you're happy, whether you wish for that to be shared.
Doesn't matter to me at all, actually, either way. But I would like to refer to that issue anyway, because I think
So are you saying that the panel and everybody else can have a copy of the unredacted version of the letter of the 17th of November 21?
yes, I mean, I just
Right.
think that if members of the public see that there's something that's redacted there, I don't like things to be redacted for no good reason, and that's all. I mean, the whole thing's a waste of time and money, as far as I'm concerned. As I say, it could have been withdrawn. The complaint could have been withdrawn at any time. When I told people
So the answer is
that I've
yes.
already
Yes or
apologised.
no? Yes, you're saying it can be
Yes.
circulated. Fine.
Chairman, would you like me to circulate that
Please,
now?
please do so.
Thank you, will do.
Mr. Donnelly, can somebody help me with the page number, please? And when
You're
we-
not asking Mr. Donnelly any questions. This is your statement time. This is the section when you give
Yes.
your evidence.
Yes. But don't be helpful, thanks. Okay, I'll just take my time over finding it then. We're referring to page 65, and that's of the agenda report. So whenever I refer to a page number, it will be of the agenda reports. I assume that is online, Chairman, or if perhaps the committee secretary
Well,
could
let's
tell
not
us,
worry
or do we
about,
have different page numbers?
Let-
Don't worry
let's-
about the public. Okay.
let's just worry about those in this room who understand what we're referring to.
Good Lord. Chairman, right. Page 65, Annex 5, statements provided by the independent person, Mr. William Donnelly. I've never met the man before, and I assume this is a very nice man, but I am concerned that at paragraph 1 today, in a statement he made on the 13th of December, he said the words used in themselves may not be regarded as overly offensive to many people by today's common standards, but the wider background and context of Councillor Hyman's past, it's another sign of poor public conduct of a representative of council under the council's own regulations, and very disrespectful to the senior officer of the council and the others present, and hence not at all trivial. Now, I do not know, I have no idea what Mr. Donnelly has been told about my past. As he's referring to my past and saying, in the context of my past, this makes me a terrible person. Now, he doesn't know me. As far as I know, he knows very little of my past. He probably only knows what he was told by the borough solicitor, who's no longer with us, or the monitoring officer who's here. Obviously, it would be very handy if he's making decisions based on something he's been told by someone about me. I have to ensure that Mr. Donnelly is actually reasonably aware and that he has been fairly briefed, because Nolan principles, as I said, objectivity, you must make and take your decisions impartially, fairly and on merit, using the best evidence without discrimination or bias. And so I would like to say, because quite clearly from what he's implying there, he knows something about my past that I don't know. I mean, presumably he knows I'm an ex-grammar school kid from Farnham, and that I did a physics degree, maths, physics, economics at college, that I've been self-employed, single parent, and since 2001 have been instrumental in numerous public campaigns to hold this council to account. And I assume that he knows that.
Shall we ask what relevant information Mr. Taylor told Mr. Donnelly? Would that be helpful?
I would like to have a copy of the information if possible, or if that's possible. But I mean, if we're referring to it and Mr. Donnelly has been briefed about me, surely we're allowed to know what it is he's been told if he's going to refer to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So you do have copies of everything that was shared with Mr. Donnelly. There were two things that Mr. Donnelly, I believe, was referring to there. Obviously, Mr. Donnelly can comment as well. The first was the public papers that went to the February 2019 standards hearing, where your conduct was considered, and the decision notice that was published once the panel reached its conclusion that you had breached your code of conduct. That's a matter of public record. You have it. It's referred to in these papers. Everybody can see a copy of that if they want to look at it. And the second thing, you can see a copy of on page 71. It's part of my correspondence with you, Councillor Hyman. When I wrote to you referring to this complaint, I referred back to an advice note that I'd issued not so long ago, which I felt was relevant, where I'd given advice to you about how you should display good conduct when seeking to challenge and criticise others. In that note, I also referred back to the judgment of the panel when it met in February 2019, where the panel had been very clear in their decision in public that you did have a right to freedom of expression, that you did have a right to challenge and to criticise, but that you should do so in a constructive and respectful way. So these are all relevant matters to this hearing today. They are all matters that have been shared directly with you. And I shared them directly with Mr. Donnelly to enable him to do his job that we ask him to do, which is to give an informed view as the independent person on the situation. Now, obviously you'll see within the pack that you didn't reply to that email from me or any of the emails from me, but it is the case that I shared all those emails with you. And I would just make the point here, Chairman, as well, that I did write to Councillor Hyman, making him aware of his right to consult with the independent person as well, but he exercised his right not to consult with the independent person, and that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Right, so we now know what
thank you
Mr.
for that.
Donnelly had seen. So anything
Okay,
else you want
so
to
that's
say?
based on, so this is based on information provided by the monitoring officer in respect of the previous case in 2019, from 2017 to 2019.
And the information that I included in my email to you when I received the complaint from Councillor Rabini and when I first wrote to you. So this is information that you had, but didn't respond to.
Okay, and so am I allowed to address that? Am I allowed to address the previous decision that was made by yourself and two other members as it's being referred to as being this is?
It's a matter of public record, what happened both at the hearing and the outcome, and we're not going back over that bit of history.
So Mr. Donnelly is unaware that I was dragged through through a 2-year system for saying the words misquoted chairman.
He will have seen the papers that existed in 2019.
And he is not aware that the issue at hand was the habitat legislation, which
No,
this council
well,
has been
he-
ignoring,
He would not.
and which the
no,
courts have
both-
determined this council has been in breach of the law for the past 15 years, as was Guildford and
not
all the other
In
councils.
your
determined,
view,
no,
we're not.
determined by the courts. Please do not insult me, Chairman, by telling me that it's my view. I'm only quoting the facts from the law. And if you
Well,
look
put
at PPG, and this is the problem, Mr. Chairman, that you're not going to allow people to know what's really going on here. We have got a PPG. This
We are
behaviour
not
is going to
into that,
continue this
Mr.
evening.
Hyman. I rule
Mr. Chairman.
all that out of order. We are dealing with the narrow issue that has been investigated by Mr. Lingard. That is all we're dealing with. We're not going to spend the whole day going through planning guidance.
We don't
all
need to spend
things
the
that
whole
you-
day. It's a
where
very
we
simple
have
question.
where we have had council's opinions and so on and so on. We're not going into any of that.
And the courts have determined that all of that advice that we had for years and that we received from officers was incorrect. That is the people over win judgment.
Well,
That
I'm
all
sorry,
the
we are
advice
not.
that all the councils were provided, which means that
We are not.
everybody for 15 years has been wrong.
We are not dealing with that,
and we
Councillor
are still
Hyman.
continuing to, and it's the
Will
monitoring
you
officer's
please be quiet
responsibility.
and keep the thing to the relevant things?
The
Otherwise-
relevant things, Chairman, is who's doing the right thing here and who isn't. Because it is entirely wrong to drag me through this process
It is not
at the
wrong.
cost to taxpayers, which we're not even allowed to know. As some vexatious, but I mean, quite clearly, this is totally trivial. It should be a 2-minute job. And if it wasn't for the fact that I was being slagged off here by people who are incapable of telling the truth themselves because they cannot admit,
Chair,
Yes.
like yourself,
Could I ask the legal advisor
they
to
cannot
advise?
admit
Can you
that they
be
were wrong for
quiet,
years.
Mr. Hyman?
No, sorry,
And
Chairman.
I am
You are
asking-
blocking justice
Can
here.
I just remind you, Councillor Hyman, that the purpose of this hearing is to consider the complaint that has been made against you in relation to the language that you used during a briefing meeting. And that is the whole remit of this hearing today. And that is all that is being considered. And my understanding is that you have accepted that you made that comment and that you've also indicated, which is different to what we've had in all the reports, that you have apologised for making that comment, which is new information, I believe, for the hearing today. That is the remit of today. Unfortunately, we cannot go into any matters further than that. That is the complaint. That is what has been investigated. Those are the papers that are before this panel today, and that is the matter that can be considered.
Thanks very much for that explanation. I'm sorry, but I saw in these papers, and I can go through them and find it, which tells us that the purpose of this is to improve standards and make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again. Now, obviously, if this sort of thing isn't going to happen again, firstly, I need to train my finger better on an iPad trying to work the mute button, but obviously need to be careful, as many others have. We've had a number of councillors say insulting things during meetings, and their dogs and their kids are in and about and all sorts of things, and nobody else actually gets a mention from it. You apologise, you move on. But I'm here, and all this money's been spent for a reason, and you know, you need to determine what is it? Why are we here for this? You need to please consider that I am being. I've had 20 years as being the
Mr.
whistleblower.
Hyman, the
I've
reason
had 20 years of disrespect from yourself and many, many others, Chairman. We had a meeting, I went through a 2-year process where, as the monitoring officer knows, I was forced to go to a personal meeting in the evening to be given the complaint papers against me. It was
Chair,
a ritual.
can I just...
And the following morning, Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Hyman, the solicitor wishes to amplify what
After
she
reading-
said. Will you be quiet, please, and have some respect for this panel?
Councillor Hyman, you need to confine your comments in relation to the issues as I just stated them, which is in relation to the complaint that was made, for the comment for which I understand you believe you have apologised. If there is anything further you can add to your statement in relation to that matter alone, then please do so. If not, I believe we should probably move on, Chairman.
Yeah. The crucial issue here, Councillor Hyman, is that you say you apologised for the words used, where there's no evidence in my pack to say you did from
Or didn't.
anybody, and therefore any evidence you can give about that would be helpful.
What more do you want to know? I apologise. It was about 2 minutes after I said I gave my apologies for leaving the microphone on accidentally, and I apologised for using the term BS. I think I wrote down at the time. I have got a recording, and if we want to go to appeal, then I'm happy to put it to put that in front of people, and they can see for themselves. I haven't listened to it. I don't have hours to spend to go back to past meetings.
And you haven't got it with you, so we haven't got that evidence if the panel decided.
Well, I wouldn't
to
be able to
listen
play it to you. Well, I suppose I could put it onto a machine or whatever, but as far as I'm concerned, this matter here, I mean, I am here because of the false information which is in this documentation. If we have to go to appeal, get today over, we'll go to appeal and we'll and sort it that way and waste a load more of people's time. But you know, the difficulty I have here, all of this is wasting an awful lot of money of residents'
what
money
other evidence
for no good reason.
You say, I mean, you've heard from Mr. Taylor, who listened, who was at the meeting, that there was no apology for the words used. You've not raised it with anybody present who are giving evidence here. You have not raised it in any email at all. So obviously the evidence is a little thin.
I was quite happy that I give my word, as I do in this chamber. I always speak the truth in this chamber.
Yeah.
I knew
Chairman,
that I'd apologise. I assumed that no one would come here and say that I hadn't.
So, Chairman, just for as a point of information, of accuracy, Councillor Hyman has said that he's never been asked to apologise. Clearly, that's not the case. You will see in Annex 6 of your papers the various times in which I wrote to Councillor Hyman and actually was very clear that a recognition of what had happened and an apology would draw this matter to a close. That was pretty clear. So it simply is a matter of public record that it's incorrect for Councillor Hyman to say he has not been asked to apologise. I asked you many times whether on reflection you wish to apologise. It is, you know, of note that you're saying that you have apologised in the past. Certainly I'm not aware of that. It may be that you want to be clear about that by apologising today, but that's a matter for you to determine rather than me to direct you.
I told you on the phone that I had apologised for both.
I would ask the panel to look.
I have made it perfectly clear, I apologised for both.
Well, you're interrupting me now, Councillor Hyman. I would ask the panel to look at Annex 6, where I have included my summary of that phone call. So the reason I wanted to do that was that the panel does need to be clear about what Councillor Hyman said and the way that he said it on that phone call. So it is not the case that you took the opportunity which was offered to you on that phone call to apologise or to engage positively with the process. What happened on that phone call, unfortunately and regrettably, was that you displayed very bad conduct and disrespect towards me, and that is all contained within that summary.
Yes, indeed, and that's what I'm trying to address here. If I'm allowed to continue, if I may, please, in respect of it. We'll go back to later to what was said on the telephone between
no, let's deal with that
officer
now.
And myself. But I want to know, if I may, because I was explaining about the heart attack issue, which we want to cover. That's in the document that's just been put in front of us, and I want to make sure that's covered before you draw a close to things or whatever. This was the think the 25th of April 2017, that I was drawn into the monitoring officers. I was told I had to attend the monitoring officers office to be given a pack of documents. That was a process that we went through. It was not a nice process at all. But I did attend that. So there were 2 complaints, which were from the virtually the first meeting I attended as a councillor. No one else gets dragged into the monitoring office of the first meeting they go to. That's a badge of honour, obviously. The complaints were from the chairman of the planning committee for stating, for saying the words misquoted chairman, and for the from the borough solicitor, who decided to add a complaint in respect of another planning meeting in March of 2017. So the previous one was about October and November 2016, and that complaint was for making statements in respect of. I simply quoted the law.
Look, we're dealing with, as the solicitor has made clear.
Thank you for interrupting again.
This is not part of what our hearing is about. We are here for the narrow issue of the words you used in August 21 and on our papers, the lack of an apology for the words used, which you say you did apologise.
No, surely we're dealing with what the documents in front of us, Chairman, aren't we? May I address the documents in front of us and the slurs that they make against me? Or not?
We're dealing with this narrow issue, and I don't intend for time to be wasted and money to be wasted to go through things that happened 5 years ago or 3 years ago.
Well, this is based on what happened 5 years ago and 3 years ago, Mr. Chairman.
This is a case in
that's what Mr. Donnelly has said.
This is a case in isolation where we are dealing with what happened in August 21.
Not according to Mr. Donnelly's evidence that he's put in here. He has said, in view of this is a cumulative issue of the and I asked what it was in my past that he knew about, and we've been told that is a cumulative issue, is what he's saying. Because of the information he's been given, I attribute none of this.
Let me make it clear, Mr. Donnelly's role here is to give the monitoring officer the permission and the consultation to go to an investigation. Mr. Donnelly does not decide what the facts are, but he has to be satisfied by the monitoring officer to stop the monitoring officer having everything investigated that he could, that it has to go through a sieve, if you like, which is the independent person who looks at the evidence and decides whether it should be investigated. We've heard from the investigating officer that he's investigated it, and in his view, you may disagree, but in his view, it's a clear-cut case of disrespect in breach of a code.
I agree. It's everything else that's in here that I object to. It's the fact that we are not allowed to look at the truth. We're not allowed to place the Nolan principles themselves above the need to be polite.
Yeah,
and we've got to be very careful what we do.
Chairman, just to be clear, so yes, I did, as you say, I asked Mr. Donnelly for his view as an independent person, and I really valued that view and carefully considered it before I took any action. Part of what Mr. Donnelly, I don't want to speak for you, but part of what Mr. Donnelly said to me was that in this case, he has noted the fact that this is a cumulative issue and the fact that as well as being investigated for this alleged breach of conduct, you appear to have shown poor conduct by not engaging. And so just to be clear for the panel, the fact that it is a cumulative issue, and in my view, it is a cumulative issue, is okay for you to look at. And it is part of the context for this situation. So it's okay for you to look at the way that Councillor Hyman is engaged, and it's okay for you to consider this incident as part of a broader pattern. Ultimately, you're being asked to comment and make a decision about this particular issue. But there's no need for me or anybody else to withhold the fact that there have been other breaches of code in the past. Matter of public record.
So it is a cumulative issue.
Yes,
Can I just to add to that? You cannot reopen those matters that have already been decided, though. Those stand, and this panel cannot relook at all of that information.
I appreciate that, but obviously the facts of the world are the facts. If we suddenly learn that the world isn't square, then we don't continue to act as though the world is square, even though we can't change the decision of the man thousands of years ago who said it was square. In this instance, if I may, Chairman, defend myself, what I was saying was that I was called into the monitoring officer's office. I consider myself, as I'm being criticised heavily here, I consider myself that I was treated extremely condescendingly. The issues that I had raised were matters of law, which I was not providing an opinion. So I knew that what I'd been saying was correct. The matters that I was being criticised for were issues which the courts had decided that I was correct about, and that the practice of the councils was wrong. That's been decided by the courts, and the decision made by yourself and the panel 2 years ago ignores the decisions of the courts. It was not something on the agenda. As today, truth is not on the agenda, nor is the law. So it doesn't matter who's breaking the law, it's whether you're polite about it when you do it. It doesn't matter if people are dissembling, being mistaken, whatever words you wish to use. It's as long as you do it nicely, that's fine. Well, to me, no, I'm here to say no. Actually, the principles come first. Telling the truth is the important thing. And if we can't have that in this meeting, then, as I said at the beginning, I probably should have gone home at the beginning of the meeting, because I'm not going to be allowed to defend myself. But I went along to the meeting with the monitoring officer, was very unhappy with the way that I was treated, was provided with a pack of documents. I got home and I didn't read it. I did have a meeting of the council and a meeting with the head of environment as well, where I was refused environment documents which are to do with the air quality fraud. So, a number of investigations of fraud and different things going on at the time. And I was the key whistleblower, you would say. I was given these documents. The next morning I read the documents. I got to page 21, where it told me that basically the head of legal, Mr. Bainbridge, was...
Sorry, are we talking, just to be clear, Chairman, are we
stated-
talking about this set of papers?
I think
or
you're
the
No,
previous?
if you would allow me, please, to defend myself.
you
No.
are not going to go through the history.
I'm not, Mr. Chairman, I'm getting you to,
Will you
but you're just
stop
not going to let me do it, are you?
No, I am going to allow you to give your evidence about this matter in 2021. We are not going to go through the history prior to the decision in February
excuse me a minute.
2019. Are you leaving, Mr. Hyman? I think we'll adjourn briefly, turn off the machinery.
Thank you. I do apologise, Chairman. I hope you appreciate that the strain that you put people under during these processes, and that this is entirely unnecessary. Now, as I was trying to say to you, when I went to see the monitoring officer, he gave me the pack of
And
documents.
this is 2017 we're talking about, is it?
And the
or
following
19?
morning,
What date was it you saw the officer? 2000, which year are we dealing with?
25th of April 2017.
Yeah, I thought so. What's that got to do with 2021?
Will you allow me to tell you?
Briefly, because if it's a vendetta against officers, I'm not interested,
It's not a vendetta against officers, Chairman.
right? What is it?
It's never been a vendetta against officers. It's about cleaning this council up.
Cleaning the council up.
Yes, that's what Farnham
And
residents are about. It's a bit-
which part of the council are you
It's what
wanting to
Farnham's
clean
wanted
up?
for years.
Officers or members?
Cleaning the council up, Chairman. It's about compliance with the Nolan principles. That's the whole basis of Farnham residents.
So
And that's
council.
why we've got this administration here.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, I'm not going into what happened in 2017, 18 or 19, because it is irrelevant. That
This
has
is
been
what I
heard.
foresaw with your chairmanship, and I apologise to everyone here, but I think you can understand why it's pointless engaging with this process if you're not able to get to be
No,
able to
we
defend
are
yourself
here
or
for
get
the
a straight
narrow,
answer.
as has been explained to you by our legal officer, by Mr. Taylor and by me. We are purely dealing with the incident in August 2021.
If you could show me a little bit
And
of
there is-
respect, please, Chairman.
Sorry?
If you could show me a little bit of respect, please, Chairman. I've been trying to make this point, and I intend to make this point, and that is that the following morning, I read the documents. I got to the point where I read that the borough solicitor had made a statement which equated to "it's him or me" in his complaint. I put the document down. This is such things that you can appreciate are very strenuous for a councillor. I didn't realise I had a heart condition, and a couple of hours later I had a massive heart attack and was in hospital, and if it hadn't been a Wednesday morning I was told I'd have been dead. I have absolutely no intention of going through that again. I don't want to go through that again. That was as I said, that whole entire episode of the complaint, which lasted 2 years, was one where the position I took in the chamber was deemed correct by the courts, by the ECJ and people over Wind, had clarified Wadensey. I was correct. The council had been wrong for years, as I'd been saying. Many times I have stood up against decisions being made by the council and have been proved correct either by Secretary of State screening directions on various issues. I have proved that the advice from officers is not always correct. We're not allowed to say it in the chamber. That was the purpose of that complaint. That I'd implied that the officers were occasionally might be incorrect, and you're not allowed to say that. And I was found guilty of that. But that's all. And I was correct in what I'd said. And all I was fighting for was the Nolan principles and truth in the chamber. And this is going to continue. This is the problem. You know, I know I've got a planning meeting this evening where the same issue is going to come up again, and I will not be able to get the truth. You can understand, I hope, that when I have a document in front of me like this telling me what a bad person I is, for everything I've done for nothing over the past 20 years, and I've got a lot of friends and a lot of people who support me, and it's only in the political world because we kicked out the Conservatives from Farnham, the Lib Dems hated me for kicking them out many years ago, and it's an anti-politician stand, it has to be. I know that I'm not going to be popular in this place. I know I'm going to have to go through this sort of thing, but I am surely just entitled to get to the truth in a hearing like this, right? I need to be able to defend the claims that are being made that I was completely disrespectful in not engaging. I did not engage. I deliberately did not engage. Number one, because I knew that I had already apologized. The monitoring officer knows that I said to him that I had apologized. The complainant himself, I told him that I apologized. He trusts me. I've been a friend with him for many, many years. Very disappointed about what he said to me in the church on Sunday, frankly, because he told me on the phone, and I know it, that he was going to contact the monitoring officer the next day and ask him to withdraw it. So I'd like to know from the monitoring officer, please. So I'm not going to engage with something where I can't get the truth out of people. We've had 20 years of it. It has been basically most of my life for the past 20 years of trying to get this council cleaned up because of what it's doing to Farnham. And if I were to tell you, actually I will tell you, because you ought to be told, in 2003, I came here as a member of the public and I was told by a councillor that the reason that that this council was going against all the views of people in respect of a major £120 million development scheme was to F Farnham. It was to get back at the rest of the borough, to get back at Farnham. I was told outside that door there, the gentleman may have been tired and emotional. I didn't drag him through this. Well, it is, because actually that's the start of this. This is the start of this process, because obviously you're going to defend your town if you're told that that is the purpose. And that's what all of this is about. And that's why I'm here today, because I'm still fighting.
Let's get this clear.
Right?
You say you've
I decided I was
deliberately
not going to engage, Chairman. I've absolutely decided I was not going to engage because, number one, I'm right, and number two, there's no point. So, as you've been told, Madam, Mr. Chairman, or as you've said, we're not allowed to cover whether you're telling the truth or not, who's telling the truth. People can be winding you up as much as they like, and if you're impolite, as actually happened at that meeting, the meeting in question here, if you're impolite accidentally, you're the person who gets sanctioned, not the person who was misleading everybody. And my reputation is at stake here. It's important to me to defend my honour. I know I didn't engage. The reason for that is, what's the point? Well, when you come here and you're told you're not allowed to defend yourself, my blood starts boiling. My heart rate last night, because I have to do it because a doctor wants lists of it, was up at 171. I do not want this. I want to avoid this at all costs. You are now going to probably, in your decision, I assume, force me to take weeks off so that I can put all the evidence together. I've wanted to avoid this completely. I mean, the tripe that we've got in here, implying what a terrible person I am, when I was the only person in that meeting actually sticking to the Nolan principles. Okay. Yeah.
Anything else you want?
I don't want to go through that, but if I'm going to be forced to do it, Mr. Chairman, I really don't want anything to do with this process, because I've after the last time when the courts have determined that I'm right, but the law doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if the council can break the law all the time. If I'm rude about it, Mr. Chairman, then I'm the person who's the trouble and needs to be got rid of.
Anything else you want to say?
Well, yes, I do think so, actually, because the major issue that's at hand at the moment is we do have, to your right, Mr. Chairman, the head of audit. The head of audit knows that I made demands which end at various meetings, which ended up with the matter going before the audit committee on the 8th of November, and the chairman, and as chairman, he asked questions where the head of planning then responded he would provide the information needed for us to act lawfully, and he hasn't done so. We know for a fact,
I think attacking the panel
that the council is still acting unlawfully, and that's what this is about. And I have to make it clear that this is about preventing cleaning up of the council. It is about time. Actually, I have constantly tried to get a duty of candour brought into because Huddleston doesn't seem to be accepted in this place. It's not a cards face up place, is it? I didn't engage, Chairman, and I apologise to the independent person, and Mr. Donnelly and Mr. Lingard. I apologise to them for not engaging, but I think you appreciate that, you know, with my condition, I do not want to be wound up. The minute that I cannot engage with the monitoring officer, I cannot engage with the chief executive officer because I can't get them to tell me the truth. That's the fact of it, and my blood boils when I speak to them. And it's what this council is like. And my difficulty here is how on earth can I go out and recruit people for the next elections if they've got to turn a blind eye to the law? Now you've got the power sat up there to change things, to decide today, actually, this is about truthfulness. We are going to look at who was telling the truth there. We are going to insist that
Chair,
this council
I
abides
am
by the law.
concerned at the truth of what happened on the 21st of August, 18th of August, 21, and what happened since. What I find odd is you say you haven't deliberately engaged and that you gave an apology for the words used. Why did you not reply either to Mr. Rubini or Mr. Taylor or Mr. Lengard, or in writing to say, I apologized at the meeting and for the words I used because I accept it was not appropriate? Why did you not tell anybody that at all until this morning?
I told the monitoring officer in November. When I
Where
phoned him.
is it in writing?
Shay, where is it in writing?
Chair, can I just clarify? It is in the papers that Councillor Hyman stated to the monitoring officer that he'd apologised. He didn't go on to clarify that. I think from my recollection, the phone call was cut off or something happened and clarity wasn't able to be sought, but it is.
Thank you, Claire. I'm happy to clarify that. Page 76 of your papers, which is my summary of the phone call, which Councillor Hyman's referred to a couple of times. Final paragraph on page 76. These are my words. During the call, you made one point that seemed to relate to your perspective on the complaint. This was that you had apologised at the time of the briefing for having accidentally left your mic on. To be clear, what you actually did was to shout the words, I apologised at the time for leaving my mic on. What more do you want from me? I will ensure the IP is made aware of your perspective in this request. And I did make sure that the independent person was made aware of that.
Yeah. So why did you not do one,
that's not true,
save
Chairman.
everybody time, including your health and our health, to say, but I apologize for the words as well as the microphone? Why was that not a two-liner back to the monitoring officer? Might have brought all this to an end. Why was that not said by you in reply to an email?
But I'm pretty sure that what the monitoring officer's just said to you, and obviously if he's got a recording of that, I'd like him to play it or whatever, because I'm quite sure that I didn't say to him, I apologise at the time for leaving the mic on. My notes say that I said, I apologise at the time. What more do you want? I said, I apologise at the time. What more do you want?
But
I mean, it wasn't a
when
question
you
of-
got this letter and your recollection of the phone call is different, you're saying, than the monitoring officer's reflection. When you got the letter of the 17th of November 21, why did you not say, monitoring officer, with the greatest respect, that phone call is not an accurate record, because what I did say was.
I refuse to engage with it, Chairman. I do not want to have another heart attack. Every time this sort of thing comes in, I spent 2 years. Yes, Chairman. No, Chairman, it would not, because you can see here, I'm not listened to. When what I say, I mean, you know, truth and law are not part of this decision. The decision's already been made. I know that. I know that I came here with the decision having been made because I did say it. I said, I mean, it's totally trivial. No one else would be treated this way. I've had 20 years of being treated disgracefully by members of this council, officers saying, Councillor Hyman is wrong continually. I am so careful with the words that I use in this chamber, when I'm in a public meeting, I take care to make sure they're true, that they're right. And people know that.
Okay.
I'm
I hear-
usually proved right 3 or 4 years after I've said it, and everybody else has criticised me heavily for what I've said.
Right. Have you finished your statement? Because then there's 1 or 2 questions that panel want to ask, and then we can move on.
No, I think actually it's necessary to go through this.
I will decide how much you're going to say. I'm only involved in the issue that is before this tribunal. Anything relevant to the words used in August 21, we will listen to, and particularly with regard to apologies that you allege to have made. But anything else we are not concerned with. We want to get to the truth of that.
Well, the truth is that I was goaded by the chief executive and with his misinformation, which, you know, I think should be taken into account.
You've made that point.
I apologised. It was roughly 10 minutes before the end of the meeting. I think it was an hour long. It was only a briefing, informal briefing, and that was the problem. That, you know, I was saying that this matter hasn't been, you know, working from home and everything. It just simply had not been before members at all. We were faced with a fait accompli from the staff.
I've made a note of that,
and I was standing up for our Nolan Principles of Public Life, which says we have to we have to challenge poor behaviour where it occurs, when we were being seriously misled.
Okay, you've heard that already. Anything new you want to tell me?
I unintentionally said that. Well, you've just told me what you want me to tell you. I told you that I was that at that time I said I apologise for accidentally leaving my microphone on, and genuinely I said something like that. It was genuine. I did not intend, obviously, to leave the microphone on. It was a mistake, and I 100% put my hands up. I did use those words. I do want to be told what words I should have used, because if I'd used other words, dissembling, lie, it's a horrible word, but you know, would those words have been okay? Because I think that's what we have to consider here, as to in looking at whether this
we will decide what we've got to look at.
What words should be used?
Something like, with the greatest respect, Chief Executive, is that true that there was no meeting?
No. I mean, I'm
if you're wanting words,
it wasn't intentional. It was unintentional. So what I'm saying to you is, right, what word would have been right? Because it's important to you to think about it. If it would have been okay for me to say lie, because that's not considered a rude word. If it was okay for me to say something else, is that what we should learn from this, Chairman? Should I learn that actually, you know, I mustn't soften my language if I'm, you know, at home in a Zoom meeting? I need to be more robust, because I'm not allowed to say this BS term. But I would be okay to say lie, dissembling, misleading, whatever.
I wouldn't suggest accusing an officer of lying would get you out of it. That's not respectful either.
Misleading? Well, I mean, so I would have been okay to say misleading.
I'm not here to give a vocabulary of words to use, but I've been on the council for 25 years, and I know how to deal with officers to get my way respectfully.
Well, absolutely, but obviously it's different when you're unable to get a response. I'm constantly told, take that out of the chamber, sort that out with officers elsewhere.
Anything else
That's
you
not
want?
possible. I've tried for 20 years.
Anything else you want to add?
Only does, yes, if we go through the Nolan Principles of Public Life, because I think I should summarise it. The situation at the time was that in respect of integrity and objectivity and accountability, openness, honesty and leadership, I considered at that time, well, in that meeting, that those were not being followed by other members of the meeting.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I feel I do have to, you know, interject at that point. It is a gross misrepresentation of the chief executive's side of this. This isn't a complaint from the chief executive, it's a complaint by another who was unhappy about how you had spoken to the chief executive. But this was an informal briefing. And so we don't have a recording of it, and that's perfectly normal. But I have to say, there are a number of people at that meeting, and I was one of them. And what we're hearing here is a gross misrepresentation of what the chief executive said. the Chief Executive was engaging, Chairman, with Councillor Hyman's question. And it's, as I said before, it's legitimate for Councillor Hyman to have concerns, to be dissatisfied, to want to ask questions or to express his concerns about how a matter was being dealt with at the council. The only thing that we are here to consider today is whether the way that it was done, the way in which the concerns were expressed, was appropriate. Was it respectful? Did it breach the code of conduct? Mr. Lingard's findings are that the words used were a breach of the code of conduct. I accept those findings, and it remains the case that Councillor Hyman was given many opportunities to apologise for the words used and not just the mistake, which we've all done, of leaving ourselves muted or unmuted. That's not the point. The point is the words used were not appropriate. They were breach of the code of conduct. It are the findings of our external investigator, and that's what we're here to discuss.
Okay, is that it, Mr. Hyman?
Thanks, and yes, but I would like there to be an apology from this council to the members of the public who have had to pay for this ridiculous episode.
Thank you. We have no questions. Mr. Lingard, I think you wanted to comment.
Chairman, stop me if I'm out of order, but I alluded to this in my report. I received no direct evidence, and neither of you, to the effect that Councillor Hyman said something to the effect of, I apologised for the words used. He has told us this morning, he's told you this morning, that he did. If that is the case, presumably he would have no objection to repeating that specific apology in this forum.
Absolutely unreservedly. I apologise. I regret using those words. I apologise unreservedly for using those that term, the BS term. I mean, I said that at the time. I told the monitoring officer in November that I had apologised for that, and if we need to go to appeal on this, if there was any sort of decision that I was unhappy with, or that I couldn't allow to continue, then obviously we're going to have to go through that information. Okay. Absolutely 100%. I apologise. What 100%? It was only a briefing. I don't need to apologise to the public. If it was the public, then what I do see, unfortunately, though, is that no one else in the borough, in the council, has to apologise for anything. Okay, very strange.
Thank you.
But I did absolutely 100%. I think that we should get an apology from the council and from the chief executive for the information he gave. An apology to councillors at that meeting.
Don't ruin things.
Well, Chairman, I'm sorry, Chairman. This is about justice and doing things properly.
Chairman, may I just make the point that that is exactly the type of apology, not where you went at the end of that statement, but where you started with your apology, an unreserved apology for the words that you used, for the use of the word bullshitting. That is the apology that I had hoped to receive, that Councillor Rabini had told me I should expect to receive, and which I genuinely did expect to receive. And you'll see at Annex 6 that I said to Councillor Hyman on various occasions, were he to give such an apology, I would consider that an appropriate resolution and it would draw the matter to a close. And if it had been received, we would not be here today considering this.
And Chairman, please understand, Chairman, that I did tell Councillor Rabini when he rang me and said, this is a terrible waste of time. Here. He accepted that I gave him my word that I had at the time. It was about 2 minutes after the apology for for mistakenly leaving the microphone on. It wasn't at exactly the same time because there was a little bit of discourse in between. I remember that. Okay. I can go to I'm absolutely certain if I go to the recording, I will. I don't really want to listen to it, but I'm happy to, and looks like we might have to, if you wish.
Fine.
But Councillor Rabini told me he was going to withdraw this.
Okay, thank you.
And what am I meant to do? I mean, why should I engage? Why am I being criticised for engaging in something where I have already told you the bare facts and everything else is a waste of time?
Yeah. Okay, you've given your evidence. I'm now going to go over to Mr. Donnelly, which is the item Roman 5, where we have 2 emails from Mr. Donnelly, one on the 5th one in chronological order, the 13th of December 21 and the 5th of May 22. Is there any comments, Mr. Donnelly, you wish to make?
A couple of general points, if I may, Chairman. Yes, I've conducted about a dozen or so of these kind of independent person reviews, and I asked a very simple question, which is there evidence here to suggest that it is worthwhile taking this investigation forward? To give advice to the monitor officer, it is his decision, not mine, but I gave him that advice, and you can see that in the paperwork. I have another role, which is simply to have a look at the report that the investigation officer has submitted, check it for its validity, its content, and also to its conclusion, which I did, and again reported back to the monitor officer to my support for the conclusions of that report. So in that respect, life was pretty simple, and I think that was very straightforward. May I just make a more general point? One is that I come to these things with a concern for the behaviour of local councils. I'm not talking about any particular council here, but I do cover 7 different councils and parish councils beyond that. And frankly, some of the behaviour and some of the language is not what I've expected from senior and respected people in the community, and I don't think it reflects well on those councils that some of that behaviour and language is used. I would just make that more generic point. It's true nationally, of course, but it's particularly true locally. The other point, if I may, is simply to say that the wording that was used is in itself continues to stand. The fact that there is or is not an apology afterwards does not absolve the words that were used. It is simply some kind of mitigation towards the words that have been used. And I think we all know circumstances where people have used very strong language, have very simplistically said afterwards, oh, I'm really sorry I said that. But frankly, there is no real regret for the words that have been used. And I think we have to be very careful that it's still the monitor officer's opportunity to take the matter forward, even if an apology has been submitted, because of the gravity of the words that have been used. I'm not suggesting that in this case, but I do want to make the principal point that an apology is not a removal of the fact. It is a follow-up to the fact that may be taken in mitigation in the monitor officer's decision.
Thank you.
It's a bit pedantic, but it's important.
Questions? Thank you very much. Mr. Hyman, do you want to ask any questions of the independent person?
No, just to say thanks very much for the point he made there, and I absolutely agree with him on that. That's, and I do want to genuinely, I mean, it's a strange position because I'm the guy who was sat at home and said BS and shouldn't have done, but accidentally that's an icon. And obviously I regret that. I do apologise absolutely for doing that. I mean, and I did at the time. And I've told people I did. Okay. That's my point here. But on a wider issue, Chairman, if we're going to move forward,
the independent member is the situation we've reached. If you have a question, please ask it. If not, that's it. No, we will sum up at the end.
I thank him very much for his time. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Now we've now got to item Roman 7. Which is summing up by the investigating officer, followed by summing up by Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think there's anything to say. The apology has, unless my ears deceive me, been repeated. I think that's all that needs to be said.
Thank you. Councillor Hyman, summing up.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to apologise to the public for where this has gone to. I'd like to apologise that I didn't engage with it, but it does, whenever this comes up, it does make my blood boil. I don't want to have anything to do with it, frankly. And as far as I was concerned, it was nothing. It was sorted at the time, and we shouldn't have been put all through this. And we certainly shouldn't have this sort of document criticising me in ways which I think are completely unfair. When you take into account that we've got an issue here where we're not allowed to look at the facts, we're not allowed to look at who's telling the truth. and we're not allowed to look at the law. And I think the system needs changing, and we do need to do something about it to improve it. But not only that, we need a duty of candour to ensure that we can get a straight answer to a straight question, so that we do not get this sort of thing again. Because I'm going to go into tonight's meeting and the local plan part 2, you know, in a situation where I am fighting the untruths, and we've got to stop this and stop the waste of money and time. And I hope that we can work together to do that. If I would have your support in future for a duty of candour that requires that we get a straight answer to a straight question, none of this sort of thing would come up. We wouldn't have these problems, and we wouldn't have this waste of money. I do apologise to everybody here present that that it's come this far. I did try to avoid it. It could have been stopped at any time by the complainant, and he told me he would. And I'm really disappointed that he then changed his mind. I don't know why he changed his mind, but that's not our consideration now.
Sorry, Chairman, I must say the representation of Councillor Rubini's role in this, I feel, is being misrepresented, certainly in terms of what was said to me. I can't speak for what Councillor Rubini has said to you, Councillor Hyman, of course, but when the conversation with Councillor Rubini, well, first thing to say is that Councillor Rubini chose to put the complaint in, and I, you know, received that and have been dealing with it, and that's why we're here. The other thing to say is that, you know, Councillor Rubini felt, as we all felt, this could be easily dealt with by way of an apology, and he wanted to try and get such an apology from Councillor Hyman. And the point of the discussion with me wasn't to tell me that I needed to cancel anything or withdraw anything. It was his complaint, not mine. His point to me was that, you know, was it worth him speaking to Councillor Hyman to see if he could persuade Councillor Hyman of the reason of making an apology? And I thought that was a very good suggestion. And I said to Councillor Rubini, go and do that. We will put the formal investigation on hold. And I asked Mr. Lingard to put the formal investigation on hold whilst Councillor Rubini went to speak to Councillor Hyman. Now, I cannot speak for what Councillor Rubini then said to Councillor Hyman, but Councillor Rubini was not telling me to stop anything. He was asking me to put things on pause to see if perhaps an apology might be offered, and then that would draw things to a close.
Thank you.
Actually, that's important, Chairman, and I thank you for that clarification. So Councillor Rubini said he would speak to me and ask for an apology. He did phone me up, and he did. I don't know. I probably did say to him. I don't remember specifically though, so I won't swear to it here. That I said to him. I know for certain that I said to him that I did apologise for both at the time. And I know for certain that he did tell me that he would contact the monitoring officer the next day and ask him to withdraw. So can I ask, did you have a conversation with him the next day or within the next day or two? I'm not interested in holding people exactly to the word, we're all busy. Did he say to you, Councillor Hyman has told me that he did apologise, he's apologised, and I've told him that I'd ask you to withdraw it. Did he say that to you at any point?
Chairman, if I may. So firstly, this was not the only offer or encouragement to Councillor Hyman to apologise. As you will see from Annex 6, I encouraged Councillor Hyman on a number of occasions to engage in the process and was very clear, having considered the view of the independent person, that if a genuine apology for the words used was forthcoming, that would most likely draw the matter to a close. Councillor Rubini is the complainant in this situation. Of course, I'm going to consider his view. If I felt it was inappropriate for him to come and speak to you, I would have said, don't do that, but I didn't. I felt it was entirely appropriate as a fellow councillor for him to speak to you and see if by talking to you, an apology might be given. I asked afterwards, I asked Councillor Rubini, was an apology given? And he said no. He asked me, had I received an apology? And I said no. As far as I'm aware, no apology was issued. And that's the reason that we're here today.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now go and deliberate on the mayor's judgment. Thank you. We've considered, the panel has considered all the facts of Councillor Rubini's complaint, including the report of Mr. Lingard and the verbal evidence of Mr. Hyman today. And it is the unanimous view of the panel that Councillor Hyman has breached the Councillor Code of Conduct as set out in Mr. Lingard's report in paragraph 8.1. We note the apology, verbal apology given today by Councillor Hyman, but this does not absolve Councillor Hyman from the breach. So, having reached that stage, the next part of what we have to deal with is what actions, if any, this panel should take. And I'd refer you to page 13 of the report, which sets out the actions that could be taken. And before we decide on that, I would ask Councillor Hyman if there's anything he wishes to address the panel so far as the actions we might take. If you want to reflect for a short time, 5-minute think, that's fine. Otherwise, perhaps you would like to address us on that point only.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I don't know what the obviously what you are thinking of in respect to this. I mean, to me, we pursued a complaint for accidentally saying a word which isn't the worst but is rude in an informal and private meeting. It wasn't in public. I wouldn't necessarily. What sort of sanction would be appropriate? Obviously, 8.1 is publish your findings in respect to the member's conduct, and I think that goes without saying, really, that you're going to do that anyway. That's the minimum. I would ask that simply that it is explained that I would like the panel actually to put in their decision whether or not they accept my word that I did make the at this time that I did make the apology, because I don't know what his decision is going to be, and if it is a decision which, I mean, obviously is something which says withdraw my email facilities. There are a lot of things in here that you can actually do. If I'm going to be basically made as unable to operate as a councillor, I mean, I look at, I mean, instruct the monitoring officer to arrange training for the member. I did that one a couple of years ago. It's not really something which I think is of any value. It just costs money, but doesn't do anything for the benefit of residents. We've got to be looking at why we're here, and we're here in order to improve standards. And to me, I obviously would like this to include something that says we really need to change the system to make sure that we're dealing with the whole of the Nolan principles rather than just such a narrow remit. Because you know it's not necessarily fair if you can't you know if it's not the sort of process whereby the truth, people want to see that this is justice, not some sort of I think the words I've used in the past would be Mickey Mouse or process if you're not actually looking at the truth of the matter and the law. So we need to expand that, and I would like you to put in a recommendation that we do that. But I don't know whether you feel that that's in your within your remit. Obviously, there's no point in 8.2 because it's not a town and parish council. 8.3, honestly, we don't really have a system in Farnham residents because someone changed their constitution.
8.2, with the greatest respect, is to council, all.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. Yes, right, absolutely. Well, it was going to be reported to the council anyway. That is part of the process, isn't it?
I think 1 and 2 will happen automatically.
Yes.
So I understand it. It's down below 8.2. There's discretion as to what we might do. And while I'm speaking, could I thank the independent person for his time today? I know he wishes to disappear, and clearly his role has been completed.
And the chairman and
And,
Councillor Hyman, I do have another appointment I really have to get to.
thank you so much.
Thank you very
and
much.
You do leave. Thank you. Yes, sorry,
Yes.
Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. Yes, so I don't think 8.4 it makes any difference because that's already been that's an informal sanction that was made by politically, obviously, that I've removed from the executive or any portfolio responsibilities. That's I'm not allowed those, so that's pointless. Remove the member from outside appointments. Don't have any of those, so I don't think that any of that would matter. So I have a little bit of trouble in seeing where there's anything in there that I think would be appropriate, unfortunately.
Well,
you could say
we
you
ask
accept the
Could I
apology.
ask the question about 8.3, whether you have any comments on 8.3?
Well, we don't really have a system in Farnham residents anymore. It was in our original constitution to have a group or a party sort of disciplinary procedure, or just a complaints procedure. We don't have one because it was removed, so it's very difficult for me to recommend that we do something that we haven't got the capacity for at the moment.
Well, it does say in the case of ungrouped members, recommend to council or to committees.
To be clear, Chairman, that there is a group leader for Councillor Hyman with Farnham residents.
You do have a group leader, I'm told.
That may be separate
yes.
to any group disciplinary protocols that Councillor Hyman may be commenting on. But
yes.
you have a group leader.
We do. I mean that I be removed. Recommend that I be removed from committees or subcommittees of council. Well, this was a briefing. It wasn't a committee or anything like that, and I wouldn't use that language in a committee meeting, obviously. So I don't see that there's any genuine. And it was a simple mistake. It's a matter of we're going to set a precedent, aren't we? If people. You know, I mean, if it's very possible you'll get complaints coming through the system for people using similar words, but in public, which are, you know, and obviously they're going to have to be dealt more severely. And because
Mr. Hyman, I think we need to appreciate that. I mean, I can take legal advice here, but public does not mean general public, as I understand it. The fact there were 30 people present is public. But I'll ask the solicitor whether I've got that right or not.
Please, if you would.
I'd agree, Chair, with your summary of that position. We're not talking about the public, the general public. We're talking about the number of people who were present.
But it was a private meeting.
Private meeting with 30 people present.
Yes. So I mean, I think it would be called private meeting rather than a public meeting if you wanted people to understand what you're talking about.
Okay. Anyway, just so that you are under no disillusionment that this was, and in any event, code of conduct applies to private meetings as well as public meetings.
Yes, I mean, quite honestly, I don't think it should have come forward here. You know, I think in the first place, the apology was made. I know that I made the apology in the first place. Unfortunately, it appears that people didn't believe me. If I have to prove it, then I will do so. But to me, I would ask simply that you publish your findings and say that an apology has been made.
Okay. Thanks very much. We'll now withdraw again. Right, the panel have considered what action should be taken as a result of our finding that a breach has occurred of the Waverley Code of Conduct. We have taken into account the verbal apology received today. Actions in 8.1 and 8.2 will take place in any event. We are not going to recommend bespoke training, as we're aware that Councillor Hyman has already had that, and that in any event, all councillors are provided with standard training. We do not propose to take any other action. Within 14 days, Councillor Hyman, you have the right to lodge an appeal with the monitoring officer. And I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.